lover struggling with things like anxiety, depression, addiction. Well, that was me 10 years ago now, and I really struggled with my worth as a person, as an artist. And if that's you, there is so much hope. Hi friends, I'm Lauren with Lauren Elizabeth Animal Art. I'm a certified art therapy practitioner and an independent pet and wildlife artist. Today I have such a treat for you guys. I'm so passionate about this tutorial, not only because I'm going to share step by step how to paint a beautiful bright ginger tabby, but while we're painting together to help guide brain plasticity, I'm going to share the same 6-step mind renewing process that helped me through my healing journey and still I use to this day. This is why I keep a journal and or note cards next to my easel as I'm releasing and processing these things in a comfortable way with nature, with animals, with creativity. So can I encourage you, along with your paint supplies, to grab that journal, to grab that courage, and let's get started. All right, so we're gonna start on our background with white, black, and fluorescent pink. We'll mix up the first color, and you can access the reference photo, which will not be up on the screen, the traceable printout, the painting guide, a list of materials, and the step-by-step creative renewal process, all in a link down below. Now, trying new things is so good for us. I'm trying an entirely different background color that I've never gone with before. And I discovered on the canvas, it sort of looks like a pinkish purple, but it's actually white, black, and fluorescent pink. So that's lots of white, a little bit of black, and a good amount of fluorescent pink. And you'll see up against the blue that we'll mix up next, I'm gonna add sky blue to my paint palette next. It almost resembles a purple. And creatives, what's the complementary color of purple? Yellow. And then the color complement of blue is orange. And notice how we're really muting these colors. We'll be adding lots of white to these background colors, which will then contrast the vibrancy of the oranges and yellows that we add to the tabby cat fur. And then on top of that, we'll get really expressive and loose with shapely brushstrokes in the background, but a little bit tighter and cleaner with the tabby cat fur. So there you go. Already we have 3 ways we can add contrast to our pet portraits that helps create that harmony. Now for our next background color, it's not only sky blue and lots of white, but also fluorescent pink again. So that's lots of white, sky blue, and fluorescent pink. If you're working with a sided canvas, be sure to mix up a lot for both these colors. All right, so once you have your 2 background colors mixed up, I'm going to grab my size 10 Arteza angle brush. All the brushes are listed down below in a link. And what I'm going to do is work mostly behind the cat. So not reaching all the way up to the top of the canvas, but about halfway behind the cat. All right, guys, so as we're painting, I'm going to squeeze in these 6 steps, this super helpful renewal process for creative minds. Now, this is how we can bit by bit transform our minds from the inside out like it did for mine, and it becomes a lifestyle. This is not a one-time thing. This is an everyday thing, just a pattern of renewing our mind. So step 1 of this process is what we're doing right now. We're pausing. Any healthy method of getting our minds back to the present. So we're not numbing our minds, we're not trying to escape anything, we're coming back to the here and now. So depending on whether you're struggling with anxiety or depression or addiction, this could mean dancing or drawing or journaling for 10 minutes or breathing for 5 minutes or going for a really quick walk. But what we're doing is priming our minds and opening our hearts to receive. It's this humble act where we realize we have limits and we need to slow down or maybe speed up. And that's when we can really do the work. Now I'll work up a little higher above the tabby's forehead with this blue, basically about the width of this angle brush. And then I'll dive straight into that grayish pink. And that's where I'll start to really leave these boxy looking brush strokes. At the top of the canvas, as I'm doing this, I'll also leave gaps where I'll go back with the blue and fill those areas in. So I'm not trying to blend things out perfectly, but I'm trying to play with my brush, move it in a way that creates interesting shapes. And that concept is why art can be so helpful for improving brain elasticity, because we are letting go of control. We are allowing things to not go our way. We're opening our hearts and minds up to the possibilities, to challenge, and in a gentle, fun way, we're able to see our mistakes from a different perspective. So right now we're going to do a little grounding exercise where we do our deep breathing, and every exhale is releasing control, okay? So we're going to breathe in the goodness and let go of control. So deep breath in through the nose. And a long exhale out through the mouth. Let's do that 5 more times. Now, in case you're wondering, this sweet ginger tabby is named Sunny Girl. I thought it would be the best subject to bring some sunshine and warmth to your day to help us rewire our thinking. Now, on the right side, that's the darker side of the cat because of the light source hitting the cat on the left side. So, to contrast that, I'm going to add a lighter version of our blue right above that shoulder on the right side. So, I'm not adding any more pink, but I am adding lots more white and a tiny bit of sky blue right on this right side. Now, to not leave too much of a space here, I'm going to go back to our grayish pink, add a few more interesting triangular and square shapes, and then we'll switch to a small detail brush and further emphasize some of those cool shapes. Oh, this part is so much fun. We're going to grab our size 1 Arteza round brush, and I'm going to dip into our grayish pink. And I'm just going to emphasize some neat angles and cool shapes that I want to pull out even more. Adding another layer to richen up that area, make it a bit darker. And don't let me limit your creativity. This is an open-ended tutorial, so maybe you want to write a little word in the background, or maybe you want to go in with a different color and add circles over top your work. Whatever you feel led to do, listen to those creative nudges. Now, something I like to often do to create that harmony is to pull in some of the background colors into the cat eyes. So as best you can, leave a little bit left for the upcoming steps. All right, creative. So next we're going to work on those cat eyes. So I'll be adding to my paint palette grass green, cadmium yellow, and violet. We'll also be using more of our black and white. So again, that's grass green, cadmium yellow, and violet. And let's again surrender this idea that our painting has to be perfect. Yes, we want to learn technique. Yes, we want to improve our paintings, and it might be a bit challenging, but being judgmental, critical, uptight is not going to help us learn. But when we are enjoying the process, we're open to those mistakes and learning from them. Now that's when we can improve our minds. So I'm going to grab my size 0 Arteza spot brush, and you're welcome to use this brush or another one to mix up a dark gray, or your palette knife. That's black with a tiny bit of white. So lots of black, tiny bit of white, and we're going to fill in both pupils and outline the parts of the eye. All right, creative. So as we work on these eyes, we're going to cover step 2 of this super important creative renewal process, which is awareness. This is where we reflect on and observe our thinking. Now, building awareness simply means we're gathering information. We're not judging, we're not making assumptions about our thought patterns. We're just observing and growing an understanding of it. Now, this is again where art can really help us. It can give us some clarity on those thoughts, because sometimes we have so many cluttered in our minds. Which one do we take captive? And or how do we identify it? What is it exactly? Sometimes trauma can just make this so blurry, but the ones that pop up and surface through images, patterns, colors, lines, shapes, the ones that make us feel fearful, or the ones that make us think about our bitterness towards someone, or the ones that resonate with us, make us feel a sense of loneliness or joy or excitement. Now, this is what we want to identify. Now, this is also why next to my easel, I have my art journal and also note cards, in case I want to jot down a quick Bible verse that comes to my mind, maybe some encouragement, maybe some praise, something I'm really thankful for, or what might come up are a list of worries. I might write down my fears. It might be page after page of worries some days. Now, I'm actually adding some of our background pinkish gray to this dark gray because of that light source hitting the left eye so strong. I'm not going to use a dark gray up there. I'm going to get it a little bit lighter. But then when I switch to that right eye, outlining the outer border of the eye and the inside, we want to use our dark gray for that. Now, another way we can build that awareness, this step 2, where we gather that information, is we can learn about it from our bodies. Our bodies are telling us lots of things, like, do you feel a sense of lightness or heaviness? Is your neck really cramping? Do you have back pain? Are you clenching your teeth? Are your palms sweaty? So you want to take as long as you need, or use the time that you have to gather that data. So with my spot brush in a little corner, I'm going to mix up our pinkish gray from our background with added fluorescent pink. And I'm gonna paint in the little area to the right of the left eye. Now where we were just working, where it comes to a point by the bridge of the nose, I'm gonna pull in more fluorescent pink and even a bit of black to slightly darken up that corner. Now I've run out, so I'm going to mix up some more of that. That's black with fluorescent pink and some of our background pinkish gray. And that's what I'm going to use to fill in the right eye on the opposite side. So I'm going to wash off my brush and I'm going to go in with a little tiny bit, and I mean a little bit, of our pinkish gray and some white. I'm going to add a dab right where we were just working. It's not in the dead center, but a little closer to that inner eye border around the iris. Now my methods for painting cat eyes is I like to add a wide range of color. I like to add lots of layers to create that dimension, and I like to begin with a medium value. So not super dark, not a super light color, right there in the middle. So we're going to mix up a medium value green with grass green, cadmium yellow, and white. So this is just too light. I'm going to pull in more grass green to get that a bit darker. Now if I start with a medium value, while it's still damp, I can more easily blend in the darks and then add in the light values. If it's too light too soon, it's hard to get those values just right. And if it's too dark, it's hard to also blend in and apply the light values. So I like to begin with the medium value. Now, because this is the darker side of the face, I'm going to create what looks like a C shape around the pupil, leaving the white of the canvas a very small sliver right at the bottom left of that pupil. Now, before I hook over around that pupil, we're almost always going to have dark shadows right below the eyelid. So I'm adding a slightly darker value, the sky blue, into this green. And so directly below that eyelid, to the left of the pupil, and hooking around to finish off that C, I'm applying this now turquoise color. So we've added our medium values, we've added some of our dark values, we still have more to go with that, and then we're going to mix up our light values, blending that into some of the medium greens that we've already applied, and filling in more white. So that's why I'm going to wash off my brush and mix up a light yellow. So here I go with cadmium yellow, white, and a tiny little speck of grass green, just a little bit of green in there. And I'll fill in the rest of the white and do some blending into that previous medium green. Now continue working, but I just want to give you a heads up. We're going to be adding some orange to our paint palette soon, and then blending it into some of these greens and yellows and blues. But you'll see before that, I'll pull in more of that turquoise color to fill in a little bit more white there to the right of the pupil. So I have my orange. I'm going to pull it into a corner of that very light lime green color. We're going to place it carefully, then blend it. So I'm going to add it in 3 places, to the upper right, to the lower left, and the upper left. Now, you probably never thought orange would be helpful in adding more lowlights to a dark area, but it's mixing with some of those dark greens and blues, the color complement. That's why as I'm adding it to the upper left, I'm kind of rounding my brush strokes to begin to give it more shape. Next, I'll wash off my brush and mix up an even lighter yellow. Now that's just white and cadmium yellow. Make sure you have no other color on your brush. We're going to get that nice and bright. And I'll use that to the far right of the eye. Over top some of those oranges, we only want a little bit of orange on the right of this pupil. Now I'm going to slow down the footage a little bit for you because these steps go a little quick, but I'm going to pull in some of our orange into this light yellow and add a little bit more at the bottom of this eye. And then we just have a little bit of white left to paint in, and we're going to use sky blue mixed with white. So that sky blue mixed with white, we actually want this very light, so a lot more white than sky blue. Be careful how much blue you're adding. I went a little too dark at the beginning, so you want to fill in that white of the canvas and do some blending into the medium green. All right, so we'll let that right eye dry. Then when it is, we'll add the eye highlights, but let's move on and keep working on that left eye. Now I'm gonna apply a bit different approach to this left eye because of how much light it's getting. I'm gonna start with the light medium value. So this isn't the lightest value, but close to it with less grass green and a lot more white and cadmium yellow. So again, that's cadmium yellow, white, and a bit of grass green. I'm going to paint in the areas getting hit with the most amount of light first, and then we'll blend in the medium and dark values. Now, just like we did on the right side where we left a slight border of white around the pupil, we're going to do that around the entire pupil on this left eye. We'll shortly fill that gap in around the pupil with a very light turquoise. So when you're ready, with what little light green I have in my brush, I'll mix in sky blue and some white into that and paint that entire white area we left around the pupil. So if you notice here, I'm wiping off the excess paint on my paper towel, and then I'll go back and blend those areas together, that light green with the light blue. Then I'm going to go in with my light yellow mixed with some orange. It's just our light yellow with orange, and I'll add that around the bottom of the eye first, curving my brush strokes, getting that right above that dark gray outline. And then I'll also add it to the upper right of this left eye to the right of the pupil. Now, because of that light source, both eyes will look a little different, but we also want symmetry and we want a little bit of a connection with color, which is why with the clean damp brush, I'll mix up a sky blue with white to mix up a light blue. I'll add another layer around the left eye pupil and a few dabs to the left of the right pupil. I'm going to wash off my brush again and dab it damp, not so it's sopping wet, not so it's completely dry, and dip into my cadmium yellow, grass green with the sky blue, mixture to give the left eye, the bottom of it, a bit more of a shadow. Again, that's right above the dark gray outline. And it's important when we're working with detail brushes that we don't leave a lot of water on it. That'll drip into our paint, can smear our paint. We also don't want it dry because then that starts pulling on our canvas. Now into a corner of this turquoise, I'm adding a bit of black, and I mean a tiny bit. I want to darken up that sclera area in the bottom right of the left eye, just that line. Then I'm going to wash off my brush again, mix up a dark gray, so that's black with a bit of white. Because if you remember before, we almost always will have shadows at the top of the eyes below the eyelid. So I want to get that in, even in this eye that's getting the most amount of light. But I won't stop there. I'll also again add another layer to the bottom of the left eye. I'll also use this gray for the bottom of the right eye, doing more of those rounded brush strokes. And then I'll reshape the inside right of the left eye, bringing that line up, curving it up at the top of the eye a bit more. All right, so these eyes look good, but they need more contrast. We need to add lighter highlights and slightly darker lowlights. Now you'll watch me and I do add a bit of grass green, but I'm gonna say you don't need it. Just go with the cadmium yellow with white, make that a very light yellow, and we'll add it to the far left of the left eye. Then on the iris, the colored part of the eye, with added white to that, I'll make the far right side even brighter. And with a few subtle little dabs, I'll do the same thing on the right eye. All right, so I'm going to mix up more of our dark gray. I'm also going to ask you to leave a little bit of water in it from your cup of water to create a glaze, real subtle glaze inside the right eye. So black with a bit of white. And instead of thickening up the line around the iris in the right eye, I just want you to add a little bit of a glaze over that shadow. The move that I made makes the eye look a little too far to the right. So add this watered down gray to add a glaze over top the far left inside of the right eye. That's it. Now I continue with that glaze in the far right side of the right eye, just in that little corner. And I even added a little bit more above the top of both eyes. We don't want this to be goopy paint. We want this to be watered down so we can add a thin little tint over top these areas. So step back and look at your eyes. See if you have anything that's off. We want these to be symmetrical, almond-shaped eyes, but rounded by the sclera. So this glaze can help us reshape them if you need to. All right, so next with a clean, damp brush, this really needs to be clean because all we'll be using is white. And if you watch me, I'm adding just a bit of white to the far left side of that left eye, and this strip of a highlight will overlap the pupil just slightly. Now these eye highlights have shape, and there's a rounded shaped highlight right below that. Now for this right eye, you might need to add a bit of water, tiny bit, to this white so it's a glaze. So you want to place it in the right spot. It really matters over top those dark eyes. So I added a little circular shaped highlight on the right eye in front of the pupil, and then the one below that is slightly overlapping the bottom of it. Now, a little trick in case you need to separate highlights is to go back with a glaze of gray. A very subtle little separation line between the two. You won't really notice that it's a gray because it's a glaze. Or if you need to bring down a highlight, darken up the area above it. I'm going to do that on the right eye now. I'll go again back to that glaze of gray and do some more reshaping on the bottom of the left eye. I just want that to be a noticeable shadow, but not too bold, on the bottom of the left eye, as well as curving the shadow on the far right of the right eye. And last but not least, I'm going to push the rules a little bit and make that highlight below the strip on the left eye a bit wider, bit bigger. And that's using just a little bit of white on my brush. We don't need much. Now, did you know that ginger cats can often get sunburnt because they just have so little pigment in their skin? And we're going to be painting that very light exposed skin around the eyes now. So we'll need raw sienna and permanent red for this, and your fluorescent pink. Now the first color mix up isn't right, so bypass that first mixture. But what we'll be doing is raw sienna, a little bit of permanent red, fluorescent pink, and white. I'll say that again. That's raw sienna, tiny bit of permanent red, fluorescent pink, and white, and we'll start painting the border around both eyes. Now we'll actually be mixing up a light value of this and a dark value. So I'm going to actually pull in, for that light value, fluorescent pink and white. So as you can see, I test this out, work on the left eye, that border right below it, and then I'll go in a separate pile and mix in white with fluorescent pink. So closer to the inside of that left eye, getting closer to the point, the bridge of the nose, that's where I add the light value pink. I also add that light pink to the opposite side of the left eye. Now on this right eye, there's not as many highlights here, just a little bit. The light pink will sit kind of in the middle below the right eye. Then I'll go to the darker value brown pink, work in the upper right corner, and definitely in the lower left corner. In fact, this brownish pink, in a corner of it, I'm going to get it darker, so don't take up the whole mixture. I'll add the smallest little bit of black and raw sienna. Now I'll actually do this again, but again in a separate pile with raw sienna and more black into that pink mixture. And we want this dark because of this shadow from the bridge of the nose. And we're gonna do that in the corner of the right eye. Then I'll add that in the upper right corner of the right eye, just a little bit. Now I'm going to add the smallest little bit to the left of our eye. So this is now on the opposite side of the eye, not inside, just a little bit with our dark pink brown. So next we'll be using that grayish pinkish brown above both eyes with a thin layer. Now this is outside of both eyes. All right, let's take a break from the eyes. We're gonna move on to that nose. So I'm gonna mix up raw sienna, orange, fluorescent pink, and white. That's raw sienna, orange, fluorescent pink, and white. So I'm aiming for a medium value, not super dark, not too light, just right there in the middle. Now, as you learned when I painted the eyes, I will intentionally leave spots of white exposed and then go back to it with a different value. So I'm going to do that on the nose, leaving the left part of the nostril and the far left side of the nose exposed and filling in the right side. So now into a corner of that, I'm going to add lots more white and cadmium yellow and fill in the exposed white on the nose, the left side, but still leaving that bit of white on the left side of the nostril. For that gap, I'll just use white to fill that in. And I thought I could use this light value to add a highlight on the right nostril, but it just doesn't show up yet, so we'll have to wait till that dries. So while that nose dries, let's work on the inside area, inside the nostrils with a gray. So that's white with a bit of black. This is more of a medium gray. This isn't super dark. And we just need a little bit of it. It's going to be darkest on the right nostril on the right side. So let's start there. Shape that nostril if you need to, if you went over things. And then a lighter version will go on the left side. So for the left side, into a corner of that gray, I'm going to add lots of white to make that a light gray. It really needs a lot of white to actually lighten that gray up because of how dominant black is. And that's what I'll do to fill in quite a big chunk below that left nostril. If you need to, like me, I went in with just white to lighten up that outer part outside that left nostril. So let me just clarify. Inside that left nostril, it's going to be a medium gray. Outside that nostril, it's going to be a light gray. Then with that medium gray, I'll outline the mouth, giving it a little bit more of a shadow right below that center line. All right, so taking a quick jump back to the eyes, I'm actually going to adjust the pupil on the left eye. And that's with our mixture of white, cadmium yellow, and a tiny bit of grass green. If you don't have it, that's white with a bit of cadmium yellow. We made a light yellow, and then it's a tiny bit of grass green. I'm just going to lower that left eye pupil. Then after that, we're going to go back to our gray glaze. So if you need to mix it up again, it's black with a bit of white. Water it down from your cup of water and then add another layer over top the left eye. So this is right below that eyelid. Now, while we have this gray, we're going to continue on with, in this case, it would be a wash because we're putting it right over a white canvas. And starting on that right side, I'll bring the shadow all the way down. And where we have the lines on both the left and right sides of the nose, right above it, I'll add this wash over there too. So again, that's on both sides at the top of the nose. So I'm just doing a little dab test to see if this is dry. It is a lot easier to apply the highlights once it's dried or tacky. I'm adding fresh, clean white to my paint palette because I'm running out or it's gotten a little dirty in the other one. So I'm going to mix up a very light yellow with white and cadmium yellow. I'm not only going to outline the left side right above the left nostril over the nose, but also not even on the nose, but right above it. We're going to start adding some highlights of yellow there. And then I'll overlap our work on the far left side of the nose and connect it to where I put it above the nose and on that left nostril. Then with what little paint I have left on my brush, using the dry brush technique, I'll add the smallest sliver of a highlight above the right nostril. We want that subtle. Then I'll go straight back in, adding more to my brush, and right above the right nostril, so there's a gap in between those strips of yellow, I'll add yellow there as well. And just a refresher, or maybe this is the first time you're hearing it, the dry brush technique is where you're painting and then you don't continue adding more paint to your brush. You just continue painting with what little paint is on your brush. All right, creatives, so we've completed the eyes, nose, mouth. Now we're working on the ears. I'm using my size 8 Arteza Cat's Tongue brush, and we're going to mix up a beautiful peach color that's with fluorescent pink, cadmium yellow, and white. Fluorescent pink, cadmium yellow, and white to create a light peach color. I'm going to add more white to it, and we're going to fill up the majority of the left inside of the ear, except the outer edge of it. I'm going to leave more white of the canvas for a different color that we'll be using, but I'll just leave a sliver around the ear. Now you can see I've almost somewhat cut this ear in half with how I'm painting it. To the right of that, we'll add a mixture of more raw sienna into this. So into a corner of this color we're using, I'll add a good amount of raw sienna to darken it up. This is going to be where those inner ear hairs are going to come out from, so we want it a bit darker. And yep, you guessed it, I am going to leave a border of the white of the canvas on the right side, just like we did on the left. Now you'll see I leave a little gap at the very top of this ear that actually wasn't intentional, so I recommend filling that in. Then into a corner of that mixture, okay, so with the added raw sienna to that peach tone, I'm adding permanent red. So just at the very bottom inside of this left ear, I'm staying more at the base of this ear and then carefully blending up, but not far up. It might even help to wash off your brush and just use a damp brush to blend it and keep it at the bottom. Now we'll actually be using the cat's tongue brush to mix up the next color, but then we'll be switching to a detail brush to apply it. So I'm going to mix into a corner of our brown, peach color, raw sienna, and fluorescent pink. That's a bit of raw sienna and fluorescent pink. And I'm going to use the size 0 Arteza liner brush. That's the long, thin liner brush. I'll pick up some of that. And if you watch me first, I'm going to carefully outline right between where we left the white of the canvas and where we added that light peach on the left ear. But once I get to what's called Henry's pocket, this little part that's sticking out, looks like a pocket on this left ear, I'm going to wrap around the bottom of it and fill this area in. But once again, notice I'm not going all the way to the top. I'm leaving a border of white, very thin. Now, silly me, I didn't go up far enough on this left ear. I'm gonna use this color, this brownish peach color, to fill in that area, but still leaving that border. All right, so we're actually not done with the darkest values in this left ear. We're gonna go a smidge darker with a mixture of permanent red and raw sienna, equal parts raw sienna and permanent red, just at the bottom, okay? We only wanna keep that at the very base of this left ear. And I'll show you again my fun little trick for blending. If you're applying something really dark over something relatively light, just wash off your brush only so it's clean and damp. You're no paint on it. And then you blend it out with the other color. We're basically just pushing around the paint so it's almost like a glaze, thinning it out so that it looks like this nice progression from dark to light. All right, so as you finish up that left ear, I'm gonna go through step number 3 of this rewiring process, okay? Now, step 3 is both very simple, but also very difficult. And it's choosing to change, where we get to a point where we no longer place blame, we're no longer pointing fingers, but we're choosing to use the information that we've gathered, the things that we've reflected on and observed to help us grow. So we're both choosing to believe that we can change, we're choosing to make those changes, but not perfectly and not without help. We'll talk about that a little bit later about support and accountability. But next, we're going to move on to that right ear, guys. I'm going to switch back to our size 8 Arteza cat's tongue brush. We want to make this side a bit darker, again, because of that left side light source, which is why into our peach color, just like the left, we're going to add raw sienna. So it's raw sienna, fluorescent pink, white, and cadmium yellow. I'm going to add a bit more fluorescent pink, test it out on the far right side of the inside of the right ear. But then in a corner of it, I'm going to recommend in a corner of it to add permanent red for the bottom right, okay? Leaving that white of the canvas as a border around the ear as we're working inside the ear, but I'm starting at the base with this darker value. And once we get back to the top of the ear on this right side, then I'll pull in more of the lighter orange. So as I move over to the left side, I'm going to pull in more raw sienna. So I'll slow this down even more. What little orange red that I have on my brush, I'll pull in more raw sienna with a bit of black. That's what I'll add in the lower left corner of the right ear, again leaving that border. So that's the white outline I'm leaving around the right ear as we work inside of it. And I want that outline to be the same width as the one on the left ear. So with this color, I'll go up about an inch or two from the bottom left of the right ear and wash off your brush then, and we'll switch to that lighter orange red that we started with. So I am also, into this orange red, gonna add a bit more raw sienna to it. Now I'm only just mixing up this color because I'm running out of the peach color. We want it lighter at the top, so you may not have to do this, or if you're running out, that's fluorescent pink, cadmium yellow, and white for the very top of the ear. Excellent. So we're going to move back to our liner brush, okay, size 0 Arteza liner brush, into what little leftover orange red that I have with added raw sienna, okay? So this is slightly darker than the left ear inner outline. And just like we did to that left ear, I'm going to bring that line down all the way to Henry's pocket, fill in that pocket. Now, I actually fill in this little gap all the way to where it meets the background. I don't leave white just because of how far out the gap goes on the far left ear, on the left side of it. I thought it might bring a little bit more balance to have that ear extended out more so than the reference on this right ear. So that's up to you what you decide to do. All right, now going a bit darker with the inner ear, and it's going to be even darker than the shadow we added on the left with black, a bit of permanent red, and white. That's black, permanent red, and white with my liner brush. I'm going to place it, then with a clean damp brush, I'll blend it out. So let's just place it in the same place but on the right ear, and then we'll wash off our brush and then thin out that paint, blending it out. So just a little reminder here, leaving your detail brushes, especially your liner brushes, face down in the water could really damage the bristles. So I will wash them off in my cup of water, set them aside, and I'm using my size 8 cat's tongue brush that's clean and damp to then blend out the inside of the ear, just like we did on the left side. And I want to smooth out any harsh lines between the color that we just applied and the orange reds. Hi creatives, sorry to interrupt, but if you're interested in learning how to paint your own household pets, cats, dogs, and other pets, maybe even accept pet portrait commissions, or paint wildlife, my Masterclass Bundle is now available. Drawing and painting pets and wildlife was a tool I used through recovery to calm me down, and along with my mind renewing process and my faith, truly did transform me from the inside out. This used to be an ongoing course, but it is fully complete. Over 250 pet and wildlife drawing and painting tutorials. It's honestly a great starting point for creatives struggling with their mental health, who want to master technique, who want to learn color theory, who want to improve their animal portraits and maybe even sell them or accept commissions. If you're interested, I have links to the Masterclass Bundle down below, or even share it with a struggling friend you know. Let's get back to it. All right, so we have the eyes, nose, mouth, and ears done. We're gonna work on that cat fur. I've turned my paint palette around just to give me more space. And here are my favorite colors for painting ginger cats, okay? It's raw sienna, orange, cadmium yellow, yellow ochre, and burnt umber. All right, so again, that's raw sienna, orange, cadmium yellow, yellow ochre, and burnt umber. So we need a good amount of space on our paint palette so that we can mix up these colors for the fur. Oh yeah, and we'll also be needing white. I also have a clean cup of water. And before we get started, just so we're not smudging paint, I recommend that the eyes, nose, mouth, and ears be dry before we get started. So when painting animals, I like to mix up my core colors, and then from there we'll mix up more colors, okay? But these are the ones that were the main ones we're pulling from, starting with raw sienna and burnt umber. Starting from the bottom of my paint palette and working up, I'm gonna create these dark, medium, and light values. Now for our next color, I'm gonna pick up a little bit of this brown, add it to the next color in a separate pile with added orange, raw sienna, and yellow ochre. So this next color, which will have a little bit of this brown orange in it in a separate pile, I'll also be adding yellow ochre and white. We want to make a brown yellow orange, a little bit lighter than the last color. So that's our previous orange brown with yellow ochre, white, and more orange. Now this is our medium value and we pull a lot from this color. So mix up enough. Then for one of our light values, we're gonna pull some of this orange that we just mixed up with added white, cadmium yellow, and yellow ochre in a separate pile. Again, that's yellow ochre, cadmium yellow, white, and some of our previous orange that we just mixed up. Now, very often, ginger cats have some kind of white in their fur. It might just be really small little bits of white in their stripes. It might just be white on their belly or on their chin. I'll either go light blue with that fur or purple. And because I already have blue in the background, I'm going to go with a light lavender for the white fur, which is why I'm adding violet and fluorescent pink to my paint palette. Our very light value is white with a tiny bit of violet. Make sure you're mixing with a clean paint palette or clean brush so that there's no other color except for lots of white and a teensy weensy bit of violet. Now I'm jumping ahead a little too fast. I need to also mix up a light gray. So before you grab that size 1 Arteza round brush, we also need a light gray, a little bit of black, lots of white. This is where we'll be working first on that white fur. So when you're ready with a size 1 Arteza round brush and our light violet, we'll start with that on that right top lip. I'm going to first place it almost in this triangular shape on the top lips and the bottom chin. And then we'll blend directly into the right side of the chin our gray. And what we want is for these values to be relatively similar. These are our shadows here around this white fur. So we don't want these values too dark. We also don't want them too light. It's better to go too dark than jump too light too soon. So test it out on your canvas, adjust it by lightening up by adding more white, or darken it up by adding only a pinhead size amount of paint with your dominant color, like black or violet. And once you have it, we're going to be blending some of those grays to the right of the chin into those violets. Now, I recommend washing off your brush so you pull off that gray. Then we'll mix up an almost white violet. It's almost all white, little bit of our light violet in there. And that's what I'll be pulling from to add to the right and left of those lips where we've painted, getting it a bit lighter. So if you have a little mix between your gray and your violet, that's entirely okay, but we're focused on value, not on color here. I want to keep the area to the right lower chin, the darkest part, as well as the inside around the lips and towards the bottom of the muzzle. That's where we're going to see a bit of a shadow. So once I've applied the medium and dark values on the muzzle area, now I'm going in with our lightest value. This is almost white, but it has a little bit of violet and gray in there. So I'm adding this above the lips on the muzzle, above the previous paint we've applied, doing some blending as well. And I'll also bring that to the left of the chin, also blending that, connecting it with the medium values we applied there. Now the furthest left side of the chin, I'm using white. That's straight white, and I'll even bring it up a little bit into the side of the face. Then I'll go back to that medium value gray that we applied on the right side of the chin, but with added white on my brush, I'll just lighten up the right side of the chin, where we're getting a little bit of light hitting here too. So I suggest you wash off your brush, make sure it's clean and damp, and we'll go back to our light violet. We'll pick up on the right side of the muzzle on that top lip. On the very corner, I'm going to pull in more white. So it almost looks straight white here where it's getting highlighted. Then I'll go back to our light violet and work on the right side underneath the chin area. Now make sure your brush isn't too dark of a value so you're not pulling it into the light violet. You might need to wash your brush because we're going to go on the opposite side, getting hit by more light. We want our light violet now on that side. I'm going to wash off my brush, add into a corner of that light violet even more white, and paint in the end of the top lip now. Now for this next part, I know it looks like I'm dipping into the light lavender, but the left side of this mixture is darker, has more violet. You may need to add a tiny bit of violet for this part. A medium value violet is what I want to add to the lower right side of the top of the muzzle. Underneath where we added that light value, I'm blending it into those areas. Now here's how I transition to the stripes and the orange fur. The medium value violet is how I do that, starting with the right side of the face. The darkest side of the face is where I begin with the orange fur. So I pulled in some of our medium value orange brown into some of that violet. And then with clusters of lines, I'm also pulling in some of our light yellow brown right above it, this paint mixture of yellow brown. That is helping me further blend into that medium value violet and map out these stripes. So I'm looking for these stripes. So going again into our medium value orange brown, I'm going to jump up a little bit to that little stripe. I'm going to map these out and then connect them. So these are definitely not perfectly straight. A lot of them are curving. They are like hook-like. So definitely look at the reference photo as we're doing this. Now I'm going to bring it up to about there, then go back to pull some more of that orange brown and paint the next stripe above that. That is definitely curving and connecting to that eye. Now we do want to connect this orange brown to the corner of the eye. Now it gets a slightly bit lighter in value where we have that line beneath the eye. So that's why I'm going to pull in some of our yellow brown, going right underneath that line. So again, right now on my brush, I have a mix of the orange browns with the lighter yellow. That's what I'm using. And my brush strokes are a bit more horizontal now, working underneath that right eye. So once I get to the end of that line, I'm going to start working down, moving down towards the top of the right of the muzzle. And in a little bit into this color, I'll also pull in more raw sienna to darken up this area. So I'm almost going to connect this to that stripe on the right side of the face, but not quite. Again, we're kind of just mapping things out, placing them where we think they belong, and then we'll connect them. Then into a corner of this left eye with a clean damp brush, I'm going to go into our orange brown, our medium value, connecting it to our work where we were just working beneath the eye. So I like to think of it this way. I'm placing, then shaping, then connecting. Because if you haven't noticed, each value and each stripe creates its own unique shape. So that's what I'm also looking for as I'm placing these values. So I'm going to go into our lighter yellow brown, start working on the line to the left of the right eye. So we have that gap there, and I'll connect that to the orange brown. So now with these angled brush strokes, we're paying attention to the direction of the fur. I'm going to work down to the right side of the bridge of the nose, all the way down to the top of the nose. Now, it wouldn't make sense if this was lighter than that area to the corner of the right eye, so I'm going to darken it up by blending in some of our orange brown. You see how forgiving this is. If you have the wrong value or it's too light or too dark, darken it up while it's still wet or lighten it up while it's still damp. Now to the right of that, here is where I'm going to lighten up the yellow. So our yellow brown with added white, and I tested out, it's not quite light enough, so I add more white. Now this won't go down too far into the muzzle because this is the colored fur part above the white fur. And on the opposite side of that, right before I close that gap, I'm going to pull in more of the original yellow-brown, not the one with added white. See, otherwise if I left it like that and didn't darken up this area, we would have these lines, these blocky areas that weren't connected. But we're still not done because we have that dark orange-brown area in the corner of the eye that we need to connect. And here's a fun trick. I'm pulling in violet now into raw sienna, so it's just violet with a bit of raw sienna. And while that area is still damp, before it dries, I'm going to blend it from there down into where we were just working. You see, guys, when it comes to orange tabbies, violet or burnt umber, anytime I need to darken up an area, just like here where I'm working to the right of that area, to the right of the muzzle and up, just adding a little bit of that will either complement the yellows, and if you add just a small amount, it's subtle enough that it connects so well with the oranges. And before that raw sienna mixed with a little bit of violet dries, I'm going to add a bit to the right side of the bridge of the nose, just to smooth that out. Now I'm seeing above that area needs a little bit more of a shadow as well. So I'm going to wash off my brush, mix up a slightly darker value with violet and the light value yellow brown. So I'm just going to add more of our yellow brown into some violet, and with very subtle dabs, okay? Not bold strokes, but little dabs. I'm going to add some right above it. Now going even darker now, we're going to use our orange reddish brown that's below the orange. We're going to start working up and to the right of the right eye. So I add a few dabs, then I go back to our orange brown, blend that in, and work more down. Now the reason I chose to do that is because I want to have it more brown, the dark values, than reddish orange, and that's kind of what that color looks. It looks closer to vermilion than brown, which is why as we move down, I'm going to start introducing some of our dark brown. Mixing that in a separate pile, okay? I don't recommend using all the orange brown, but pulling in some of that orange brown with the dark brown. So now we're working with a decently dark value here, working on that right shoulder. I'll work down a little bit more, but then start working up again. And it's up around the ears where it starts getting a little bit more light, even on this right side, which is why we'll lighten up this value soon. All right, so into a separate corner with what little orange and brown I have on my brush, I recommend pulling in the light yellow. So here I'm pulling in some light yellow to lighten that up. Honestly, you could also use white. It's a light value that I'm using to lighten up that color. I'm going to bring that up almost all the way. But before I reach the very top, I dip into our dark brown. And that's what I use to not only bring down that shadow into our work, but also to fill in more white at the bottom of that Henry's pocket on the right ear. All right, so skipping a little bit around here, I'm going to wash off my brush and move below that right eye and to the right. So we have white left around here. I'm going to pick up where we left off, working around the stripes. What we don't want is to have the lighter fur in between the stripes on the dark side of the animal's face to be the same value, which is why I'm adding more white to kind of test this out and gauge how much lighter this is or needs to be so that it doesn't look like too much light is hitting this dark side of the face. Once all the white is covered up, values can be adjusted. Those first 1, 2, 3 layers, you're not boxed into that. You can always add medium values over top. You can go a little lighter, you can go a little darker. But we also have to consider the bone structure, that cheekbone. I want to indicate that by going a bit darker and blending some of the yellow brown in with the orange brown. Now, dab after dab, I'm going to carefully bring that down a little bit more and over to the left, blending that in with some of the lighter yellows. But we don't want to go too much over our white fur where we have the violets. Again, these values are just too dark for that. We'll need to use our yellows to transition into those violets, or maybe even add some more violets to help us do that. So our lighter version of the yellow-brown with added white, I'm going back to that with the clean damp brush, working around the stripes. and carefully moving in towards that white fur. And if you need to here, pull in some of the light violet to connect it. So I'm adding some of the light violet in and resisting the temptation to blend. We want to indicate fur texture, so we don't really want to blend too much. All right, so I'm going to move on from that, pulling in more of this yellow into some of the violet, working down. So with more horizontal, short little brush strokes, I'm going to work down along this stripe here. And then on the next row, right next to that, cutting slightly into those light violets, I'll add the yellow-brown. So you'll see as I paint in the rest of the white along this right side of the face and join it with some of the violets, it kind of looks like violet is peppered in there, but still very similar in value to the yellow-brown. Now notice I'm adding in more white into this because as I move to the left, I'm getting closer to the light source. That's what I love about this type of cat. The lesson here is you can interchangeably use light violet or light yellow-brown or just light yellow when we're working with light fur. And that's what I'm doing here in this little white spot that I left. I'll do the same right above on the other side of this stripe here. And I just want to clarify, this is the lighter version of yellow-brown with the added white and the violet. We need it to be around the same value. But directly to the right of that, because this is just over the white fur around the eye, I'll go in with the regular light brown yellow without the added white. Now I add a bit of this and realize it's just a little too light in value. I test out the orange brown, still not dark enough, and so I pull in our darkest brown. So behind that area, connecting it to where we have those orange reds, that's where I'm going to start adding this. All while I'm also curving my lines, my rows of lines. So you'll notice here, once I finally get that value darker, I slowly, gradually, as I work up, move my brush so it's a bit more vertical and not as horizontal. Now don't let me confuse you. The ideal color value here is the yellow-brown with the dark brown. So I bring a few brush strokes down right above the right eye. And then before I move up and over and get to those forehead stripes, I need to make sure I get the gap below the right eye filled in. So I'm going to give my brush a good wash and my cup of water, and instead of starting with violet, the light violet underneath here, I'm going to actually start with our yellow-brown on the inside left below the eye, and later we're going to add little accents of violet over top this layer. Now before I fill in the entire strip with this value, I am actually going to add more white to this yellow-brown. In the middle, that's where I'll add it in, and then go back to this slightly darker value of yellow-brown. The bridge of the nose is creating more of a shadow on the inside corner of the eye, but on the right side, above that, that's where the light is hitting the right side of the face. That's why I wanted to make sure I highlighted that, and then it got a little bit darker again above there. Now we actually, to the left of this area, have more white to fill in, and we'll go to our violet. But before I do that, with this light yellow that we've added white to, there's 4 spots that I'm going to add little dabs of this light yellow to bring out the highlights. It kind of also creates more texture. It looks a little flat in this area. Now again, I'll go back to that light strip below the right eye, bring it down at the lower corner, just with a few dabs. And in fact, I'll pull in some of our orange brown into that yellow brown. So we're going to work now to the left of the right eye and the rest of the white we have there into our lavender with the light yellow brown. Okay, you might need to mix up some more. That's our light violet with the light yellow brown. I fill in the bottom of it, but while that's wet, I'm going to pull in a bit more violet into a corner of this, just a little bit, to darken up the left side. See how I'm not bringing that darker, slightly darker value of purple up too high? I want to go back to the lighter version so that we can transition to a lighter yellow above that. So here I go with the light yellow brown with added white. It's very light. And to the left and right of that traceable outline, the stripe there that we haven't filled in yet, and connecting it to the violets and yellows below it. That's what I'm going to do. Just blend it in and fill in more white right above the right eye. All right, so for this next step, working on the stripes on the right side of the cat, I recommend you watch me first, then give it a go. I'm using a mix of the two orange values we have mixed up, the darker one and the medium value one. I'm cutting in slightly to create that texture of the fur into the side of the face, but also filling in more white on that shoulder. As I move down, still continuing that row, I'm going to pull in more of a lighter value of our light yellow brown. I was actually going to add some of our light violet, but I just don't have much left, so I pulled in a added white into the light yellow brown. Because if you notice, there is a lot of light hitting the chest, the upper chest below the chin. So I'm starting to indicate that with these lighter yellows. Now, once you've done that, I also want to show you a mistake I made here that worked out. I accidentally got some violet in with some yellow brown, but you can see I'm carrying this stripe down and over to the left. I pull in more of the yellow brown to kind of blend that out so there's not so much violet. I go in with our orange brown, the medium value, and I carry that stripe down line after line. These are lines at an angle, connecting it to the top. Then I just start a little bit on the next row of our stripe with our orange brown, but I don't carry that all the way down, just off the side of our canvas. We're going to go back up to the head. So before we close that gap on the above the right eye and move over to the forehead, we're going to go to our medium orange brown and do some touch-ups. Like here, I'm covering up some of that light purple and also connecting the dark side of the face to this stripe. Then I'm going to pull in some of our orange brown, again, the medium value, and draw that stripe out to the right of the cheekbone just a little bit more. All right, so now we're going to move to the top of the head with the clean, damp brush. Now for this step, I'm going to recommend in a separate pile mixing up our brown orange with some of the darker brown. We're going to fill in a lot of this space below the right ear, covering up a lot of that white with our lines at an angle. So to get that texture and to cover up more white, the closer I get to the center of the head, in the middle of it, my brush strokes are going to get a bit more vertical. So I'm working to the left, even wrapping around to the far left of that ear, but only filling in the bottom and wrapping around the bottom of the far left corner of the ear, leaving the top exposed just like we did around the ear. So now we're going to work on those stripes. So I'm going to mix up our medium value orange brown with the darker one below it in a separate pile, I recommend. And I'm going to start filling in these stripes from our traceable outline, and we'll work on the one above the right eye. See, I'm adding just a little bit of the light yellow brown at the top. But then for this stripe right next to it on the forehead, which we will bring to the top of the head, I'm doing a mix of our medium orange and the brown. You'll see that I'm going to lengthen this stripe and also leave those gaps that I already had there between the traceable, because this is important. That M shape design that tabby cats are known for, it's not this perfect straight line that's all connected. These dark stripes have gaps in between with the light fur. They're also bending and windy. Now I'm going to jump again to the far right, lower right of the left ear with a mix of our brown, dark orange, and our medium orange in a separate pile. So here I'm going to go to the darkest part where it's getting very little light, and then I'll finish off those stripes. So I'll connect it and bring it down to that stripe on the far left of the forehead, and then connect it to that stripe we just worked on. Now, if you're struggling to make this M-shaped design on your cat portraits, I'll link another tutorial down below. I really go over it in detail. It's a great practice lesson to improve. So notice here, I'm actually bringing it down at a different point that trails off to the one on the right. I'll also finish off the far left stripe and then wash off my brush. Jumping again to right above the right eye where we have some white left, we're going to create a gradient. We already have our dark values there. We're going to go to a medium value of brown, our medium orange, and I'll pull in some of the light yellow brown. So our medium orange, our dark brown, with a mix of our yellow brown. I'll fill in the area right below that, but before I close that gap, I'll pull in more of our light yellow brown. So that's yellow brown with the added white. It can really help to place the stripes on the forehead by also working in the light fur around it, which is why I'll work with this light yellow brown to the left of that stripe above the eye. I'm going to bring down that area I was just working at to the very top of the bridge of the nose on the right side. That's not with our lighter yellow brown, but the original yellow brown. So to smooth out those values and connect them a bit better, I'll go back with a clean damp brush to my light yellow brown with line texture at an angle. I'll layer that carefully here above the right eye and jump at that white spot below the right ear. This is between the stripes. This is our mix of yellow brown with added white, and I can actually start working up around those white borders that we have around this ear. This is that lighter value that we can work around that border, but staying more at the base of this right ear. Now I'm going to go jump to the opposite side of this right ear around the Henry's pocket where we have a little strip of white. I'm going to use that with our yellow brown. And before we switch brushes very soon to a detail brush, we might need a little bit more of the medium orange below that just to join it with the darker values. Hi creatives, real quick, I want to share something I've been up to for a while, actually since last year, and it's called my Transformed by Hope collection. It's a series of cat, dog, insect, bird, painting originals in a colorful, bold, bright way. I want to help the hurting, healing, and heartbroken have a visual reminder that healing is possible, that good things can come of our mistakes, of our failures, of our hard, dark circumstances. Now this collection is almost finished, but if you'd like to be the first ones to see the originals, to see the prints, plus get a free Tuxedo cat step-by-step tutorial, join my newsletter in the description down below. Let's get back to it. And here's where we can get rid of that harsh line at the base of the right ear. With our lighter yellow brown, we're going to add clusters of lines sporadically above this right eye This will take some time because to get rid of that line, I'm using taller lines that are going in the opposite direction, cutting up in towards the inside of that ear. You see how I'm carefully layering these clusters of lines that are not in perfect rows, but they're more sporadic. It's just those taller strands of hair that are getting touched by the light. Now I'm adding white as I get closer here to where we have the light violets and those lighter areas around the stripes, around the right eye. That's where I added more white to the yellow brown. And then jumping right above there where it is getting much lighter, I'll actually mix up a lighter color with cadmium yellow, our yellow brown, and white. Now you'll see I only do the left side, but save yourself some time and a step and use this light yellow to do the whole border around this right ear. Now again, if I go too fast, be sure to use the pause or play button on your screen. So I'm going to continue on with this light yellow brown, lots of white added to it. I'm looking for those harsh lines that we can get rid of with more clusters of lines layered over top. Like right here to the left of that stripe above the right eye. Now changing the direction below the right eye with a few highlights, again in the middle area. Now let me ask you, do you notice any harsh lines, extreme darks up against extreme lights? Now I don't mean by the stripes, we want to keep that. It's around the muzzle. So with lines, with our light yellow-brown, and by the way, this has that added cadmium yellow to it, I'm going to carefully layer lines over top that big jump in value to connect the light violets and grays with these brown oranges. Now, even above my work there, we see a line, another hard edge. And so I'll go back to just the regular yellow-brown to smooth that out. If you need to, pull in some of your medium orange. All right, so as you're working on that muzzle area, I'm going to cover step 4 of this rewiring process. So by now, our minds are calm. We've reflected objectively without criticism, and we're choosing to grow. In step 4, we're now gonna replace the lies. Wherever we don't know the truth about our circumstances, about ourselves, we will fall hard for the lies. So with all the things that you've written down and observed in your journal, in your artwork, what are some thoughts, some thought patterns that do not promote love or peace or freedom, but rather fear, self-hatred, bitterness? That's an indication that these are lies that we're believing. Now, I learned the hard way that this is a process. We don't want to dissect 12 lies at a time, just one. And we really have to work here. We might have to seek wise counsel to help us find the truth to replace this lie. We might have to do more journaling. We might have to go for a walk. It is a process just like the creation process. It does take time. But just like we know that one step at a time, one brushstroke at a time, that's how we can bring our paintings to life. Dissecting one thought and replacing it with the truth will bring us to life. All right, so with the mix of our dark brown and our medium orange, I'm going to add more contrast to the right of the bridge of the nose. Now using that same mixture, that same value, I'm actually going to adjust an area that needs to be a bit darker in value, directly above the right eye pupil. There's a light patch of fur to the left of this area, but to the right, it needs to be a bit darker. Now you may not need this, but that's when I realized I have specks of white of the canvas exposed next to that stripe above the right eye. So I'm going to touch that up with our light yellow brown. Now with my liner brush, I also slightly thicken up the left side, but just be careful. Less is more here. We don't need too much width. We are making progress here. We have at least 1 to 2 layers on the darkest side of the face. The right side of the face, I'm going to go in with our light yellow brown with added white and work with lines in between those stripes. Now we haven't finished the body yet, but we'll work on now the left side of the face, the lightest side. I'm going to wash off my liner brush, set it aside, and pick up our size 1 Arteza round brush. Now, if you watch me first and then give it a go, I'll explain my next step. So with a light yellow brown with the added white, on the bridge of the nose and right here along that traceable outline, I'm going to keep it more of a light to medium value, but not our lightest yellow yet. I want to keep that in the middle of the bridge of the nose, connecting it with those brown and oranges on the right side of the nose, and then adding lots more white to this for the far left side, closest to that light source. So here's where I'm going to add lots of white to this yellow brown. Start working on the far left side of the bridge of the nose, and I recommend to you to bring it down where there's more white. Even though I leave it white, I'll end up covering that in a little bit, but save yourself time and do that now, and then move on to our medium orange to the far left of that. As I progress down, I'm going to pull in more of our yellow brown in with the medium orange. I'm mapping out these dark and light areas, starting with the darker areas first, which is why I left a gap and worked underneath that traceable line. Now I'll connect that soon, but first I want to add more white to this yellow brown. So we're working on this lighter fur and moving more to the left, which is why as I move to the left, I'm adding more and more white. So watch me here, I'm working around that stripe with their light yellow brown. But it's not just white that I'm using, this has the added yellow brown. But once I move down below there, I'm gonna start working on the muzzle again with almost white. It's got more white than yellow brown. Now notice how I'm using this light yellow brown around this muzzle line, our traceable line. I'm working to the left of it, and slightly on the muzzle itself, carefully connecting it with some of those grays. And then I'll use this while that brown yellow is still damp. I'll get rid of that harsh line with the blending technique on the left side of this muzzle. Now this very light yellow brown is the perfect value beneath the left eye on the light fur. I'll also bring it in and down, but not all the way. I'll pull in more of our original yellow brown to blend that area in, the white left in this corner. Now this might be tricky to spot, but on my brush I have the original yellow brown. I'm continuing with the dry brush technique up a little bit more and then pulling in more white so that I can lighten it up to the far left of the left eye. All right, so I'm gonna switch brushes again because we have that white area, light fur around this left eye. Little areas need a little brush, and so I wanna mix up a very, very light violet. Mine is still a little damp. Add a tiny, tiny bit of violet if yours is dry with lots of white. I'm gonna work all around the eye with this light violet. Now to join the eyes together, I'm going to add dabs, beautiful little accents of light violet on the light fur below the right eye. Then I swiftly add in a little bit more of a medium value violet. You might need to add a speck of violet to yours and our light yellow brown. Without going all the way to the edge of that face, I'm beginning to make a stripe on the left side of the face, connecting it to the light violets at the bottom. And we're back with my 2\0 Arteza liner brush. I am filling in the white that you have hopefully already covered that I mentioned before on the bottom of the nose, right above the nose on the bottom of the bridge of the nose. Now I work with this light yellow to the far left of that. I want to add a strong highlight here, but also still distinguish the difference between this muzzle area with the violets and this yellow-orange area. I'll work up here along the left side of the bridge of the nose with another layer. Distractions here. It's funny, I only use like 1 or 2 or 3 brushes, but I have so many next to me that I don't use. So I'm also going to work above there where we have white. It's like the bottom left of that M shape on the forehead. And just to unify this area a bit better, I'm going to also pull in a few more lines a bit more of a layer on the right side below that M shape. So for about the next 4 minutes with this lighter yellow brown with the added white, I'm going to do some adjusting to the light areas, to the left of the face, filling a little bit more white, and working in between these forehead stripes. And right below that left eye, we want that really light, so it's almost white on my brush here. Now the bottom left below the right ear is getting quite a bit of light. So with some careful lines, I'm going to add some texture there. All right, some more mapping out of those stripes the best we can. I'm going to use a mix of our medium orange with the dark brown, work up a little ways, and then add a little bit of our yellow brown in there, and then bring it all the way up to join it to the top of the head. Now there's just a little bit of a indication of a stripe peeking out behind the light hair above the head, so I only brought that down a little bit. Then because this is getting hit by more light than the other stripes, I'm going to add yellow brown to our mixture of the medium orange with the dark brown. Pull up that stripe but not connecting it to the one above it. These are clusters of lines up at an angle. And with our mixture, again, of the dark brown with the medium orange, I'm going to bring down that stripe. It actually turned out to have a little too much brown on it. I lightened it up with the light yellow brown, so we don't want that too dark. And I'll also bring down the stripe on the opposite side of that metal line. Ah, there's that M. I'll pull in even more of the yellow brown into that mixture for the far left stripe to the left of the left eye. Again, using clusters of lines, and I actually bring it up a little bit, and then on this stripe below that, I create what almost resembles an upside down V. I'll continue that yellow brown. Again, this actually has a bit of that mixed medium orange and dark brown in it, just a little bit. I'll add another layer below the left eye. And the right side of the lower right of the eye, but a little bit more of the medium orange with the dark brown. Now we're going to finally work in that upper left corner of the face. I'm going to work with these curving clusters of lines beneath the base of that ear and to the left of that area with our yellow-brown. So below that and to the left of our M pattern on the forehead, I'm going to apply line after line of our yellow-brown. I'm actually not going to recommend you add a lot of white to it. This is our base layer. We're going to fill in this whole area with clusters of lines at an angle up and to the left, but we don't want to go too light too soon. Now, in that process, we've lost a bit of that stripe we started with. So once I cover up this white at the base of the ear, I'm going to go to our medium orange and darken that stripe up. Now we want to keep up a good pace because we want to work wet into wet with the next color. We're going to add very fine lines over top that area with our 2\0 Arteza liner brush with white and yellow brown and cadmium yellow. A light yellow with white, cadmium yellow, and our light yellow brown. Not only will I use this light yellow to fill in more area between the stripes around that M pattern, but while that area below the left ear is still damp, I'm going to add line after line of fur texture with wider gaps in between. We want to slowly lighten that up. Now we're going to continue with this mixture of cad yellow, white, and yellow brown. I want to emphasize this stripe, so I'm adding a row below it. Now I'm going to suggest here, you can go in with this light yellow value to finish up the rest of the white specks that we have around this M pattern. That is what I'm going to do. But guess what? As you learned, as long as it's the right value, it has just enough white, not too much, you can add light purple. You can add light blue. It complements the yellows and or oranges so well, and it just peppers in that beautiful variety. All right, so we got more white to fill in to the left of the face with lots more white into that yellow mixture. I'm going to add clusters of lines, horizontal lines on the far left of the face. So with that light yellow, I'm going to do another round of touch-ups with those lightest areas. Adding more white to this light yellow, I'll add it to the far left on the white fur around the left eye, and directly up from that with these curving rows. I'll add lines again with those larger gaps in between. That's really key here because my goal as I'm layering is not to entirely cover up those bottom layers. And like we did at the base of the right ear, adding line texture that got rid of that hard edge, I'm doing that with these light strands too. Now, taking a break from those light values for a second, I'm going to mix up a little bit of our medium orange, our brown, and our yellow brown, because I want to not only cover up some specks of white here on the right side of the bridge of the nose, but also cut over just a sliver of our purples. I wash off my brush again, and that's when I notice I need to bring down and over slightly with our light yellow mixture below the left eye. Now let's complete the rest of the white we have left on the left side of the face. I'm going to continue with the very light yellow, horizontal brush strokes, and then go right to the original yellow brown so it's slightly darker. Work down a ways, and then we'll pull in some of our light violet. So if you don't have that, that's just our white with a tiny bit of violet. Now, once I get to that line that's for the far left of the shoulder, I'll stop there and pull in some gray now. Lots of white with a tiny bit of the yellow-brown on my brush and black. Very small amount of black, so it's almost white here. I'll pull that all the way down to our light violets. Now be careful you don't have too much paint drying to your brush. We want to keep these lines fine and thin. So I'm going to go into our light violet. We're going to add some of that above the left eye, and then again work up with those curving rows. Now I also want to pull in some violets around the M pattern. I'm going to do a mix of our light violet with some of the light yellows on my brush. Add some over top, some leftover white of the canvas that I haven't painted yet, and also in between some of the stripes. Now I'm definitely in need of lightening up the area to the left of the muzzle. It's just too dark. Going in with our light violet, I want to apply a value that's not only lighter there, but also shaped similar to that highlight on the other side of the muzzle. I tell you, one step helps lead to the next step, and then that step to the other. And that's how it did with the stripe here. It needs to be darker up against that light value. So that's a mix of the light yellow brown with our medium value orange. And not only that, but with the light yellow brown, I'll extend out the thickness of this stripe here on the left side of the face, all the way down. Now you may not need to add more white, but I'm going to go in with my Fluid Titanium White. This is not by the Master's Touch brand. This is by Golden brand, the only white I buy. I also have that in a link in the description as well. You may also not need to add this highlight here because I mentioned earlier when we were painting the bridge of the nose to paint this in. I'm going in now, covering up any bit of white with our very light yellow. You can add more line texture here if you please, but keep it more on the left side of the bridge of the nose. And some more white that I left, it's a mix of our yellow brown and our medium orange. Very carefully, I'm going to add a little line there and then a few clusters of lines to connect that. Now another area of the face that could use a bit of highlight after I've washed off my liner brush, going in with our light yellow with the added white is to the right of the white fur around the left eye, right here. I need a light value to better connect this area too. Then I'm going to add more cadmium yellow to our yellow brown mixed with white, making that even brighter. I'm going to add another round of light highlights above this left eye and to the left of it. So I just want to make sure the far left of the muzzle here, it's almost completely white. It's so highlighted because it's not only facing the light source, but it's also extended out a little. So it's really getting touched by that light. I'll also add some of this very light yellow on the left of the chin. And now let's paint in that outline around the ears. That left ear we'll start with. This is our light yellow brown with a little bit of white. At first it's not quite light enough. I want it to be lighter than the inner ear value, so I add a bit more white. And we'll just paint those outlines in. Now, not really sure what I was thinking. I'm going to recommend you keep going with the light yellow here on the right side of the left ear. It isn't really getting that much darker, so it's still accurate if you keep it light. I'll bring it all the way down to the right side of the left ear and then continue with more fur texture above the left eye. Changing the direction of my lines, I'll add another row of very light yellow below that stripe below the left ear. And not using my light yellow, but the original yellow brown, I'll darken up this value between the stripes below the left eye. And here I go, finally closing off that right ear, the border. I'm going to paint it in with the yellow brown. And there's also a highlight on the right ear, a careful, subtle border outline on Henry's pocket of the yellow brown. And when I peek at the left ear on the Henry's pocket, there's just a bit of white, the line of the traceable that I want to paint over with this color. Now a fun change of pace here. We're going to still use our liner brush. You can use a different brush to mix up the color that we're going to be using. It's actually for the mouth using violet, fluorescent pink, white, and a tiny bit of black. I'll say that again, that's violet, fluorescent pink, white, and a very small amount of black. And with their liner brush, we're gonna add more of a defined line beneath the nose and around the mouth. Now this really matters even though it's so small. Small details can go a long way. I'm going to add a very thin line on the left bottom of the nose, but get a little thicker with this shadow on the right side. Now we've done multiple rounds of our highlights and some medium and light values, but let's get a bit darker. Let's add more joiner values, those are those medium values, to help connect the parts. And I'm going to use our medium value orange with our yellow brown for this. Adjusting values, getting them a little darker in some spots, like on the left and right of the M design. Now up from there on the left of the forehead, I just see it's thin there and I want to add more of a medium value right there at the base of the ear. And then along the bottom of that stripe on the other side of the ear, I'm going to also add this value because we don't want some stripes to be really thin and straight. We want them to be about the same thickness and curving. I'm also going to add some yellow brown on the right side above the right eye and touch up a little bit of the violet there. So for a little bit, I'm going to add more of that fur texture layered over top the right side. And working a little bit in reverse here on the left side, I'm going to pull in some of our orange brown into the yellow brown to give more of a medium value on that left side. I covered up a little too much of our base layer, so I want to darken it up ever so slightly. Guys, the hardest part is behind us. We have gotten the most complex parts done. There's still more layers on that face, but now we're gonna move on to the white on the body. Using a clean, damp size 8 cat's tongue brush by Arteza, I'm gonna apply a light violet. Lots of white with a tiny bit of violet, carefully underneath that chin. Then while that's still damp, I'll blend a mix of our medium orange and our yellow brown partially into some of the end of that light purple and down, curving around that. I'll then join it to the stripe on the right side. But this is why this cat's tongue brush is so perfect for painting stripes, large stripes like this. See how I'm moving my brush up and down, getting that linear texture, but also blending into some of those light violets. I'll work down a little bit lower below that light violet. Then with the paint that's left on my brush, I'm going to pull in more cadmium yellow and the yellow brown with some white in a separate pile, I recommend, and move up from there, blending down further and up until to that left shoulder. Now I'm going to skip a little white gap of the canvas to create another stripe with a mix of our yellow brown and our medium orange. And then I'll slowly curve it, working it down to the wet paint at the bottom of the chest. Now with a mixture of our medium orange, the dark orange below that, and a bit of our yellow brown, I'll not only add another layer over top the stripe in the right shoulder, but skip down again, creating another curving stripe, and I'll join it to the center of the chest. Now you may want to watch my placement before you do this because it's really important the width between stripes are the same. I'm leaving about a 1/2 inch gap here between these stripes. And then down another 1/2 inch, going off our canvas, I'll make another stripe. Now, how we're going to fill in the area between stripes is very similar technique. We have to make sure though that this value is darker than the left side because it's not getting as much light. So I pulled in a little bit of our yellow brown, still with some of that medium orange and a little bit of the dark orange on my brush. Now to get the perspective right, the body language right, this cat is slightly turned, its face and its body, so I'm going to mix some of our medium orange with the dark brown, and while this right side is still damp, I'm going to add some brown and curve it around that shoulder. Now, careful here. I actually go a little too dark at the start, so I recommend a lot of our yellow brown. You might even need to pull in some more white and yellow ochre with a bit of the dark brown. And notice I'm not going right up against that line for the body. I'm going above that at an angle, curving it just like we curved the stripes. But because that left shoulder is getting hit by the light source, that's where, as we pull it in towards that traceable line, we're going to get lighter, pulling in more cadmium yellow and white into our yellow brown. I'll jump up to the top, the little white that I have left on the body to indicate maybe a little bit of a stripe here. I'm going to add that to the top, cutting in a little bit with that texture into the background. Now, to not have us lose that part of the body on the left that we just painted, this white that's left over needs to be far lighter. So add lots of white and cadmium yellow. Be careful that it's not the same value or darker, because then we'll just have this big fat cat. We want to distinguish this left shoulder from the body, which is getting hit by far less light. And as I'm doing this, I'm going to blend my brush strokes down around these stripes, down towards that chest. Now, if you haven't noticed, there's a little point here on the cat's tongue brush. And very carefully with dry brush technique, I'm going to add just subtle little highlights over top this gap of light fur with that point. All right, so creatives, as you're working on that first layer of the body, let's go to our step 5 of the creative renewal process. So once we've identified that lie, that one lie, and replaced it with a truth, now it's time to meditate on it. Now, the definition of meditate is to think deeply. Synonyms are ponder, ruminate. So this is not a scatterbrained attempt of thinking. This is a deeply focused, calm, mental exercise, intentional thought to help us rethink that truth over and over again. It's like one rep, one thought. We're exercising those neural pathways, strengthening them so they become more automatic. That's why writing down this truth on your forehead even is going to help you rethink this over and over again so we can push out the lies. Consistency and little micro challenges is what builds healthy brains. Now, every day is a new day to start fresh. This process does not have to be perfect, but you do have to be consistent. I have a fresh, clean paint palette, a clean paper towel, clean water, and I'm reapplying our colors. This is often what I like to do when I'm doing my pet portrait commissions. I like to cover up the white of the canvas on one day, get at least 1, 2, 3 layers down, and the next day with fresh eyes, I can add contrast. I can apply the medium values. I can see where it needs adjustment to the proportions, and I'm not so fatigued going into it the second time. I can look at it from a different perspective. So the colors I'm adding again, and also some new ones from the bottom working up, is white, violet, orange, raw sienna, yellow ochre, cadmium yellow, black, and here's burnt sienna, one we haven't used yet. In this phase of my pet portrait process, this is where we're adding round after round of dark, medium, and light values. And it's actually better to have a range of values instead of the exact same ones we were working with. So our 5 core colors here of our dark, medium, and lights will be different colors, but very similar to the last ones. So right now I'm mixing up white, cad yellow, and yellow ochre. Lots of white, cadmium yellow, and yellow ochre. I'm going to wipe off any remaining color and move to the next one in a separate pile, raw sienna, orange, and burnt sienna. Raw sienna, orange, and a bit of burnt sienna. Next color in a separate pile is yellow ochre and raw sienna. That's yellow ochre and raw sienna. In the next pile, I'll pull some of our yellow brown, add in more yellow ochre and white. And for our last color, our 5th color, it's going to be our violet. And I'm going to leave a little bit more violet in there. Just give it a little bit more of a violet tone. So we're still adding lots of white and a little bit of violet, but a little bit more than before. We can always adjust it by adding in more white. So make sure you have a good of white too on your paint palette. So when I'm in this phase, I'm working more on detail, small brush strokes, adding medium values, readjusting values, readjusting proportions. So we're going to start with our 2\0 liner brush with our light violet. And I'm both going to add layers to where we've added violet in some areas and adding in more violet. So that includes the chin to the right of the muzzle, right to the left of the right eye. These are areas we've already added violet, but I'm also going to add violet directly below the right eye over top some of those yellow browns. You see how I'm starting in the lower left side of this right eye and then attaching it to the purples on the other side. That stripe to the right of the right eye is still lacking. It still needs more. So I'm going to add violet right next to it to the left and on the right. And you notice how thin and tiny these lines are. This is the fine texture on those top layers. I'll add some to the lower right of the face again. And I'll wash off my brush now, move to a different color. We want our brush clean and damp, not sopping wet. This is a detail brush. It really doesn't hold much paint or water. And I'm going to add more fur texture on the left side of the face stripe here. See how I'm cutting over top just a little bit into those violets? I'll also add more texture and a little bit of width on the left eye stripe. And now since we added darkness to those stripes, we also need to add some right below the left eye by that stripe. But I need to lighten it up a little, so I'll use the brown we were just using with added yellow. And just a reminder, that's actually yellow ochre with cad yellow and white. And I'm being a bit sporadic with these lines, adding big gaps in between but keeping them small. I brought them up a little higher than I did before over some of those light violets and also down. And that medium brown yellow that we were just using, I can add to soften and also bring up slightly that stripe to the left of where we were working. It's that middle stripe on the left side of the face. And so I'm thickening up and adding more texture around the stripes, trying to not match, but get a similar value as we lay down on the base. So I'm adding in more of our brown, expanding that stripe with more texture around it on the right side of the face and right above it. Now here's another great opportunity to learn from my mistakes. I don't recommend with your light violet for this next step to start up so high on the left side, but down lower. Because of the angle of the face, how the cat is turned slightly and pushing up some of the hair on the right side of the face, it's a little thinner on the left. So where that left shoulder connects in our painting with the face, that's where I would recommend beginning with very short lines, not up higher like I'm doing here. And slowly as you move closer to that chin, those lines will get a little bit longer. Now, here's also why I recommend at the beginning to mix up more of a medium violet than a very light one, is so that we can add a bit more darker values here. We went a little light too soon. I'm going to put it back in with more lines of a light to medium violet here on the chest. What I'm also trying to do is expand this white fur, this semicircle looking shape. We're going to actually shape it a bit better into a semicircle by widening it, not only down a little ways, but also up and to the right with our violet. Now, careful does it here. I'm going to get really close to that line for the fur line of the face, but not all the way up. So we took it out more to the right, on the right side below the face. We're going to do the same on the left side, but with added light yellow. The mixture that we started with, I'll pull it into some of this light violet. So this is definitely a lighter violet. Add more white if you need to, and we'll do the same on the left side. Now in this next step, it's a little sneaky technique to squeeze in another stripe. I'm going to pull in some of our brown with our mixture of yellows and white. So I recommend you watch me first before you try this as I layer over top the stripe we've already made here, cutting it in half and bringing it down to the chest. I'm going to add more white to this color before I close it off at the bottom, which I find a little bit of a struggle, but we'll get through that after I have highlighted the far left side of the stripe. Now I'll add a little bit of warm brown into our yellow in a separate pile, add a little bit of texture that's slightly darker in value at the very bottom of the chest. And I'll wash off my brush next and do a round of more highlights with our light yellow mixture. This time I'm actually working on the back, on the left side of the cat, getting really close with line texture to that shoulder line. So here's the thing, this row down is actually, these lines are pretty close together, But as I move up, I'm going to feather in these lines with more gaps. Now to connect this light texture to the browns, I'm going to pull in more brown into this yellow. Now I recommend you wash off your brush because we do want to go really light now with light yellow. Our yellow mixture with added white, now around the M pattern again. What this portrait really needs is to thicken up the light highlight right above the left eye. It's to the left and the right of that stripe there. And I'm even covering up a little bit of our violets. See how I'm adding both width and a little bit of length to this highlight here? And then with a little bit of our cooler medium brown, I'll add that to this yellow mixture in a separate pile. And you might even need to wash off your brush to keep these lines fine and thin. And I'm going to add more longer texture right here above the left eye to the left of that stripe we were just working on. Now, in between the stripes on the forehead, I work on the light fur with this value. And down a little ways, like in the middle of this M pattern, I add a little bit more white to our yellow. And just because sometimes in between the stripes we see little bits of light fur poking through, I'm going to do that very subtly with this value over top the middle stripe of this M pattern. I'm going to lighten up this yellow mixture again, work on the far left side of the face. More rows of horizontal lines to lighten up this side of the face. Now, all the parts of the cat, all of it, has to be consistent with where that light source is hitting. So if we did that to the left side of the face, we also have to lighten up the left side of the shoulder, and even cutting into some of those light fur stripes. I'm going to turn the angle of my brush, cut up with these lighter strands into a little bit of our dark stripes. Dark stripes, but getting more light, so it's more of a medium value. And the lower chest is also getting hit by the light source pretty strong. So I'm going to lighten up this area line after line, bringing this vertical texture, but in rows with the light yellow. Now careful here, be careful not to add too much lightness to the right side of the face. But with this light yellow, I'll add a few more accents of yellow on the right side lower part of the face and right next to the stripes here to the right of the right eye. And that's when I spot there's a few stripes that need some adjustments. I'm gonna mix up with the clean damp brush our cooler brown and the slightly darker brown below it in a separate pile. We're going to use that to add a bit of darkness to the stripes and also some texture on the very top of the head, cutting over top our blue background. Notice how I'm creating this very, very fine, short texture, cutting over top our background, and I'll even lift it up a little higher on that right side before it touches the ear. And that's when I spot a major adjustment that'll really help, and that's with our light yellow mixture right here to the far left of the nose. See how much that helps? And then to join it to those browns above it so there's not that harsh line, I'll pull in more of our brown. Now, if we increase the size and added more lightness to that highlight right above the left eye pupil, it only makes sense to also lighten up this area here, directly to the left of it, with our light yellow. Now that's when I spot some exposed white of the canvas here, directly to the left of the eye. And while we have this color on our brush, we just need a few dabs, a little bit more texture over top the light violets beneath the right eye. Just a little friendly reminder to take deep breaths, to come back to your body, to remind yourself that you're here to learn, you're here to grow, and relax. Doesn't mean things won't be challenging when we're painting. That's actually proof that we are growing, but don't unintentionally make it harder on yourself by being critical, by being mean to yourself in the process. Give yourself some grace. And that actually leads to the last step in the creative renewal process, but I'll get to that after some of these next painting steps. Now, if you notice that right side of the body is also getting some light, the lower right, so that's why I'm going to add subtle little lines of our light yellow carefully, not pushing down too hard to make these too bold, and connecting them to the middle of the chest. And I'll do that on below this area, this stripe, again on the light fur. Now I want to note too, I'm keeping this more in the middle, slightly to the right, but definitely not all the way up to that brown shadow we added on the far right side. We're not going all the way up there. Now I wanted to bring in more of this top color that we haven't added yet. So the top three mixtures in a separate pile, I'm using that to join that upper right stripe to the front of the chest, just to add more variety in color, and this also makes for the best kind of value, that medium value, to do that. Now earlier when we highlighted the left side of the face, I mentioned to create longer lines on the bottom left. I'm doing that a little bit more with a very light yellow. See how I'm bringing those lines out, those horizontal lines out a little bit over top that left side of the shoulder. And if we lighten that up area to be consistent, we have to then light up the area right above it to the left of the muzzle. We're both adding more highlights and shaping the left side of the face. So I'm going to do that around the left eye, overtop the light fur, some of those light violets with a very light yellow. And again on the forehead, right above that left eye, I'm not only gonna add more highlights over these lines, but make them a little bit longer in some areas. Now this value for the right side above the right eye is just too light, so we'll need to darken it up by mixing in a little bit of our cooler brown. And again, just like we did on the left side, adding more line texture, but having them go up a little higher this time. Now, one way to add contrast is not only to lighten up our light values, but to darken up our darks. I'm going to mix up another color we haven't used, and it's this warmer brown with violet. And over top the darkest part of the cat on the far right side, I'll add careful horizontal lines clustered pretty close together on the face and even on that right shoulder. Now take your time here, it gets a bit confusing. I'm also going to recommend you use a different brush to mix all these colors together for the darkest side on the body. I'm going to mix up our burnt sienna and raw sienna with a bit of our warm brown with added black. We will even add some of the cooler brown into this once I switch brushes because I tested out and realized it's just too small of a brush. So again, I'll go through that. Our browns, the cooler and the warmer browns with added burnt sienna, raw sienna, and a bit of black. Now that brush is just too thin for this part of the portrait, so we're going to switch to our size 1 Arteza round brush. But what I'm trying to achieve here is a slightly darker value than what's there right now on the far right side of the shoulder. So if it needs to be darker, add a little bit more burnt sienna and or a tiny bit of black. If it needs to be lighter, add in more of your light browns or even some raw sienna in the middle there. And that's what I'll do. I'll apply another layer on that side. Now it's really important you save this color because we're actually going to use this to move into those stripes on that side to gradually progress from dark to light once we mix up a medium value after this. Now next you're going to learn how to transitions from really dark shadows to those dark stripes. So I'm going to mix up our cooler brown with some of our yellow mixture and orange. And that's what I'm going to use first to lay down over top the end of these stripes so that we can blend wet into wet with the brown we were just using. So it's this nice fade from dark to medium to light. See how I've laid down this medium value, and then with our darker brown, we're going to cut in over top that with more lines, fading in from right to left. Now on the left side of the chest, there's that little bit of stripe that I want to pull out even more. So I'll add some of our yellow mixture to this orange brown that we were just using on the right side. With lines, I'll draw out that stripe using careful, small, horizontal brush strokes at an angle, bringing it down a little bit further and up. Honestly, I think this looks good. I think the stripe beneath here looks great. But if you so please, I'm going to add white to that. And on that lower left stripe, I'm not only going to highlight it, but also extend it out just a bit on the left. Now I'll add a dab or two directly to the left below that stripe on the left eye with this yellow-orange. I'll then add some of our yellow mixture because there's some light fur in between the stripes on this M pattern that is just not given enough love. We need to lighten it up ever so carefully. Then pulling back in some of that orange yellow, I notice that there's just too much of a jump between the darks and the lights here on the right ear. I pull that line down a little bit. Now we're going to lift up that dark brown on the right side of the face where it connects with the back with a mix of our warm brown and cool brown. We want to get that pretty dark and carefully connect this area, going a little bit over our blue background. I'm going to wash off my liner brush, and with the clean damp brush, we're going to go in with our light yellow and revisit those highlights, starting with the light fur to the right of the right eye. So around both eyes, I'll be adding just little bits of our highlight, reshaping some of those light values that we've already placed down. And with our very light yellow, I'm going to go into the far left of the face, extend out that highlight there, and right above the eye, on that forehead, where it cuts in over top some of that ear. Even like the dark pink base, I'm going to carefully cut over that. Now I find this part so much fun because here is where we start to add accents of violets and even light blues soon. But first, I'm going to revisit the chest with our white and our violet. We want this a very light violet here. Careful lines over top the chest. Now in a moment, I'll also pull in some of our light yellow mixture into this light violet. So we have hints of light violet and hints of yellowish violet. What I'm also trying to do, because of how light this yellow mixture is have these lines on the left side of the white fur on the chest. And again, we're really not trying to cover up all our base layer violet and all the even second and third layers too. Now less is more here on the right side of the white fur on the chest. I'm adding just a little bit on the right. In fact, I'll pull back in some more of our light violet into this yellow as I move to the right. And we want that color, actually hold on to this color for our next steps. We're going to highlight the light fur below here. Now jump over the stripe below this and on the light fur here with much larger gaps in between, just little accents here and there, and even the light fur below it with a few lines with our yellow violet. But on that lower area of light fur, it's just a little darker in value. So I'm gonna smooth it out, kind of blend it out, and spread it up a little with a mixture of our yellow and some of our cooler brown, then adding some purple and yellow back in. So it's just this little bit of subtle highlight, not too much. Now going in other places with our light violet on the far lower right of the face, on the back, even over some of those browns here, jumping directly on the opposite side, on the light fur on that right shoulder, I'll pull in a little bit of our yellow mixture, some subtle lines here, bringing that highlight up even higher. And because below the left eye, we brought out more of a highlight at an angle, in the opposite direction with our light violet, I'm going to pull that violet down below the right eye at an angle. And that's when I go in with just white. Yes, I'm going in with straight white on my liner brush, just at the tip of it, to highlight this area above the left eye pupil. Because ideally, this patch of hair, this highlighted light fur, should be lighter than the right side above the right eye pupil. I'll add a few more lines right above there in the head, but be careful not to add too much white there. It's more of a light yellow. So going back to the right shoulder, that right side of the body, I'm going to repeat the same steps, adding accents of our light violet, and then in areas where it just is a little bit darker in value, I'm going to smooth it out with a mix of our cooler brown with the light yellow mixture. If it gets too light, just add in more of that cooler brown. I'm ever so carefully, slowly raising that highlight on the light fur, but if I get it too light, I can just darken it up with some of that brown and yellow. Now I want to add back in some orange, and so I'm going to do a mix of our yellow mixture with some orange. We've added so much yellow to our portrait, but I'm also going to add accents of blue, which is going to complement these oranges. All right, so now we're going to add more sky blue to our paint palette. That's sky blue. Now this is very much an experiment. When you do this, there's a lot of testing it out and reshaping, sometimes painting over it and lightening up or darkening it up. So give yourself some grace here. I'm going to mix in white into a little bit of sky blue, so it's a light blue. Again, over top those light stripes on the right side of the body, I'll add dabs. These are a little bit more circular though. These are a bit more abstract. Create any kind of design or shape that you feel led to do. Test it out, see what happens. I'll even add some to the far right, over top some of those light violets on the right side of the face. Try sitting on it for a second, just looking at it, maybe adding different lines around it. Might have to revisit our mixture of orange and yellow. Work on another area, then come back to it, like I am finally adding that blue over top some of the violets on the right side of the face. And adjust it. If you need to make it darker, add more sky blue. If that doesn't look quite right, add more white while it's still wet. We have some wiggle room while it's wet to adjust it. And even later, if we don't like it, we can always paint right over it and try again. And that's what I noticed. Over time, I've kind of brought out the far right side of the face a little too far. I also want to add more texture there. So I'm going to go back with some of our warmer brown. I'll even add some of our orange and mixture of yellow in there. Get it just right so that we can keep it dark and cut over top some of those blues, yellows, and violets. So I sat on it for a little while. I'm not liking it. I'm not going to get rid of it entirely, but darken it up with our mixture of yellow and orange with my size 7 filbert brush. I'm adding more paint, and that area, those blues are still wet, so I'm not entirely getting rid of and deleting that blue. I'm actually blending it out with the orange and yellows. And what if, going back to our liner brush and the light blue, inside that darker blue, we create another little dot? And what about right next to it? It's different, but I like it. It kind of reminds me of a water droplet. All right, creatives, we're getting so close to the end. We're going to work on the inner ear hairs next. And for this, I recommend your palette knife to mix this up or just another larger brush. And we're going to mix up a light gray. We actually don't want this too close to white. We definitely don't want this dark gray. And we want to mix up enough of it so that we can add lots of inner ear hairs because we're so close to this cat and we can really see inside. And that's lots of white with a tiny bit of black. So once you've mixed up a good amount, we're going to grab our 2\0 liner brush, of course, test it out. We don't want it the exact same value, the relative lightness or darkness as the inner inside of the ear, okay? Add more white if it's too dark. Now we want these inner ear hairs to be longer than any of the lines we've applied thus far. They're going to be longest at the bottom inside of the ear, and as we trail up the far right side of that left ear, they're going to get shorter and shorter at the top. If you find that your lines are getting too thick, you're either pressing too hard or filling up your brush with too much paint, or you're letting too much paint dry to your brush. So keep it clean, keep it thin with paint, only adding paint to the tip of your brush. You might get away with 2, 3, 4 lines before you have to wash off your brush, add more paint to the tip of it, but make sure it's not sopping wet or not dry. That helps you have more control over these lines. What really makes this look realistic is when there's a slight curve in the lines. They're not perfectly straight. And also that they're overlapping. That lines are not perfectly spaced out, but some are crisscrossing and very close to one another. Now, once you've got a good amount of inner ear hairs on the left side, we're going to go to the right ear, but be sure to make sure it's a medium value gray, not a light gray. Now, another tip here, I especially didn't do so well on this right ear compared to the left, but right on this side of the ear, almost on the edge of it, that's where the hairs are coming out from. You don't want to leave this weird gap there that exposes that inner ear. You want lines coming out from there. Now to finish off those ears, I want to do some touch-ups on the border of yellow that we have around both ears with a light yellow, so our yellow mixture with added white. I'm not going to entirely close up this Henry's pocket on the left ear, but highlight it and make that gap smaller. Then on the border on the inside of both ears, I'll add a highlight, bringing up that highlight a little higher on that left side. I'll also add more of a highlight on the Henry's pocket on the right ear, but with our original yellow mixture, not with the added white. All right, creative, so as you're finishing up your ears, I'm gonna finally cover step 6 of the creative renewal process. And this is simply create it out. This is a healthier way of reducing stress and processing these things and releasing it into our art. You see here, I'm not escaping it. I'm not trying to stuff it. I'm not repressing it. I'm facing my problems gently in my artwork. I'm not only further meditating on that truth from step 5, but also creating what brings me joy and peace with Thanksgiving. So I'm not just dwelling on my problems, woe is me, but I'm actually seeking wholesome, good things for my mind and really chewing on that truth. And the reason compassion is so critical throughout this whole process, but especially when we're doing art, is because sometimes when we're really struggling with fear, worry, anxiety, we don't want to create art. But that's the time where we should be creating art and doing it and focusing on the process, not the end result. It's reaching for that sketchbook, reaching for that journal and writing out a poem. It's singing a song. This is why I keep my sketchbook in my tiger bag. This is also why I've set up 2 spots in my house to create, with an organized place, with all my art supplies, things that make me so happy, my plants, of course my cats. This is also why I got into animal art, because I connect so much with animals. I love animals so deeply, all animals. I love the process of painting and drawing animals. Now I'm going to add another round of our light blues, that's sky blue with white. Just perk up those beautiful blues on the right shoulder again. Add a few more dabs, a few more lines. I'm going to pull in some of our orange mixture where we added orange and our yellow. I'll pull in a little bit more yellow and add that above the light blues on the right side of the face. A few lines will do. Now, something I do, especially with ginger tabbies, because of how light their fur is, but then how dark the root of the whisker is, I will paint the muzzle, get it just right, let that dry, then work on the dots over top. So with a mix of our cool brown with our yellow, you might want to watch me here before you give it a try. I'm going to do 3 rows of dots with some gaps in between. These are dots that are really close together, and very small little rows on the left side of the muzzle, and then right symmetrical to that on the right side, I'll do the same thing. So moving to the right side of the muzzle now, but skipping that white, a gap of white around the lower part of the nose. And these rows need to line up. I'll make sure the gaps in between these rows are the same as the left. I'll even sneak in another row below here and above it. All right, so now for another round of dark, medium, and lights. But we're gonna go even lighter with a mix of white and cad yellow. In a little corner, I'm gonna add white and cad yellow. And for the next couple minutes, we'll just be adding lots and lots of highlights. I just love the yellows that are peeking through from that base on the left shoulder. So I'm going to draw that out even more. So good amount of cab yellow with white, gonna accentuate that even more there. Now that right side of the head still needs some love. We still need to add more highlights there, but not as light as the light yellow. So I'll dip into the cream color at the very top of our paint palette here, and line after line, add more highlights. Now this really helps. This area above the right eye and to the right, so like right up from that stripe, I'm gonna add a condensed lines here, more condensed clusters of lines to highlight this area and really shape that forehead. Now again, on that right shoulder, it's not quite there yet. I'm gonna pull into that cream some of our cool brown, and with some lines, bring up that highlight. Now to the right of the eye where we have that stripe, we need to touch up the highlight above it. So with the cream and very short lines, I'll add adjustments there and also right here below it. And yet another time, I'm going to extend out the far left and right sides of the white fur on the chest. I'm going to use just white carefully on the left side and our light violet on the far right side. Then on the right side with our violet, because that brownish orange has fully dried, now we can cut in over top of that ever so carefully, extend it over to the right, and I'll even brush some of it off so it leaves just a little bit of paint with my finger. I went into that stripe a little too far, so I'm going to reshape that, pulling in some of our cooler brown and just making sure that that stripe doesn't look so wonky. Now let's do a little bit of adjusting with our light yellow with the added white to our muzzle. First, right here above the lips on both sides, I'll add a bit of a highlight. Sometimes I'll use my finger to just take off some of the paint, leaving a little bit left on there. Now we need to connect that right side of the chin to the right side of the face a little bit better. So with our cream color, the one at the very top we haven't really used a whole lot, I'll add in a little bit more of our lightened yellow, and carefully, you might want to watch me first, connect the right side of the face to that chin, covering up some of those grays. While that is wet, I found that I needed to add a bit more white in there to lighten it up. And carefully, we want to gradually progress from light to that gray. So it might require us to cut up a little into that gray. Then on that side, but right above it, on that muzzle, I'm going to curve it a little bit more with our light violet and even bring very subtle light violets into our work we were just using with our cream color. Now we're still not done. We definitely want to keep working while this paint on the muzzle is still damp. The gray that we use for the inner ear hairs, I'm going to dip into some of that. If it's dry, it's just a tiny bit of black and white. I'm going to bring down and out over top some of those cream lines, some gray, and then we'll go in to the right of that, add some more of a slightly darker violet, not a light violet. So notice how I'm using this slightly darker medium violet underneath that muzzle, that top lip we just adjusted, and cutting into some of those yellows and creams. And actually, that's when I noticed there is a bit of white exposed from the white of the canvas on the left lip. So I'm going to cover that up and also accentuate those light yellows with our lightened yellow mixture. Now I don't want to just leave a line here, but I want to have it smoothed out into that gray. So with what little paint you have left, just try and smooth that out so it fades into that slightly darker gray. Next, I'm going to use our light yellow mixture to add more highlights on the borders inside both ears. So on the left ear on the right side, on the right ear on the left side. Now on the bottom right of this left ear, I'm just going to push out this highlight and this part of the ear out a little bit more into the brown. Now another small proportion adjustment I'm going to make with our lightened yellow is just to bring out this lower part of the left ear, carefully bringing those lines up just a little higher into our background. Now, do you notice that that right eye, the eye itself, looks pushed over to the right a little too far? Well, we're going to make that adjustment. I'm going to add grass green to our paint palette. My goal is to actually push that green out into that dark outline a little bit more with a mix of cadmium yellow, grass green, and a tiny bit of white. Not too light. Darken it up by adding in more grass green if you need to, but I'm just gonna pull it over some of those grayish greens that we added inside this right eye. Now, this might not be needed for your portrait, but I have a little bit of a light value cutting into that part of the eye. The green that we just mixed up doesn't cut it. I add a little bit of black in there to get that darker. And then I make that adjustment, but I also use this dark value to darken up the inner left of this right eye. I can't say it enough. There's so many life lessons we can pull from the creative process. For example, this next step makes a world of a difference with both our browns, the cool and the warm, with a little bit of added black. This shadow here below the inner left of the right eye, I extend out, and I only noticed that after I made the adjustment to the eye. Once I did, that's when I spotted it. So do the one step that you know to do, and it will often lead you to the next right step. See how much that helped? I think that made a world of a difference. And I'll also add more of that value right below there on that stripe below the right eye. And if I darkened that area up, it's only right to be consistent by darkening up the area above it to the right of the eye. And then why not with this value, let's better shape the hairs above the right eye. I brought it in, cutting into some of those, so I make that highlight a little shorter. Again, I'm using a mix of our browns, the warmer and cooler brown, line after line. Now to the left of the nostril, on the muzzle, I'm going to add some light yellow with added white, add a stronger highlight there. And about a half an inch up from there, in the corner of the left eye, I'm going to add an angled highlight. Now with this light yellow, making sure both sides are symmetrical to the left and right of the muzzle, with carefully placed horizontal lines and just a few, I'll extend that highlight out on both sides. Now for a few steps, we're going to use a mix of our yellow mixture with lots of added white and cadmium yellow. We're making Sunny Girl even sunnier by adding highlights above the left eye on that longer fur. A few lines of highlights to the right of the left eye below that stripe. And I'm going to start the first step in lightening and softening this strong stripe on the left of the cat's face. So with this light yellow, I'm going to pull it up slightly. And then we're going to pull in some of our cream color that we haven't used too much of, mix with some of our cooler brown. And I'm going to go over some of our brown stripes here to lighten them up. And that's when I noticed there is a medium value needed right here between the lighter fur and this stripe to the right of the right eye. And that's a few dabs of the cool brown below the cream. It really is a process, as you can see, layer after layer, and we'll revisit this area above the right eye with more fur texture with a mix of our cool brown and cream color. And that leads me to also revisiting the inner left ear, adding more fur texture. That's the inner ear hairs, that is, with our light gray. Now I love this next step. It really helps to break up some of the yellows on that left side of the face. I'm going to mix in more orange into a pile with our white and yellow mixture. Make sure this is light enough so that we can add just a beautiful orange accent to the left of the bridge of the nose. And I take a little bit of a risk. I love that orange so much that I add some to the stripes that we recently highlighted on the far left of the face. I also add that color with a little bit more of the white and yellow mixture to the left of our blue accents on the very bottom right over top the light fur. Again, another layer to slowly, gradually highlight this area. I'll even work around and between those accents of blue on this stripe and above it. Now I just can't resist. I want to pull out the warmness, the yellowness, the orangeness in this portrait even more. I'm going to mix up cadmium yellow into orange with a little bit of white and the yellow mixture. Again, that's orange, cadmium yellow, white, and our yellow mixture. I'm going to pull out the orange that's already in our portrait in some places, especially on the left side of the face, over top those stripes. Just few dabs here and there on the right side of the face. And the very bottom in the middle of our portrait on the chest, we need some love there. Let's pull out the oranges there that'll so nicely complement those accents of blue on the right. And you notice how in some areas I'm doing long clusters of lines, and other areas I'm doing 1 or 2 or 3 dabs, just little accents to lighten areas up. Pull out the oranges that's already there and just add more interest. Now with the earlier orange yellow, with our yellow mixture and added orange, I'm just going to revisit that right shoulder again. You know me, just adding gradual highlights here. All right, creatives, hooray! We have completed the face, the body, that whole area around the muzzle. We're gonna now make sure that's dry so that we can add the whiskers and the hairs above the eyes and those things to finish off this portrait. Now I'm gonna use a light gray for this, and I know it's scary, but we just gotta do it. We gotta go for it. I know you've put in so much work into this portrait. At this point, you are afraid to mess it up. That's a normal feeling, but try it with maybe on a separate piece of paper or canvas, practice a few times. Then I recommend starting on your dominant hand side. So for me, I'm right-handed. I'm gonna do it on the right side. The base, where the root of the whisker is where it's gonna be the thickest point. And then carefully as I trail out and slightly down, I'm going to relieve the pressure off my brush, hardly touching the canvas. The whiskers closer to the lips are generally shorter and thinner. The whiskers on the outside of the muzzle, still connected to those dots, are a bit longer. Now I'll show you some cool tricks that you can do if you make a mistake with these whiskers. I'll actually demonstrate it when I get to the left side of the muzzle. But because we're working with wet paint, if you catch it soon enough, you can just wipe it right off with a damp paper towel. Literally just erase. That's how it works. Or you could go in with the background area color. So for instance, on the right side, I can mix up more of those orange, yellow, browns and thin out that line just by cutting up next to it. So here I create a line that looks like a thick wire, just not thin enough. I also don't like where I've placed it. So if you wash off your brush, you can erase it that way, clean damp brush, or if you're able to squeeze it in there, get a damp paper towel and wipe it right off. You want to catch it as soon as possible, and then you can try again once it's dry. Now, no one said you had to paint in all the whiskers, but you can. There's no rule, but I'm going to add one whisker to the far left side of the face below the left eye, and also a cluster of 3 lines, 3 lines above both eyes. Now, while we have this gray, if you need to, let's add more inner ear hairs. We especially want to make sure we have like full, thick hair in there where there's not huge, wide gaps exposing too much of the pink closer to the inside border of the ears. We also want it to be longer inside the ear, hairs much shorter going all the way up to the top of the ears. Now again, just a reminder to take deep breaths, step back, and look at what your painting needs. At this point, it might be different than mine. I'm going to do another round of these beautiful light purple accents all around the portrait. Now with all that yellow we added to the left side of the shoulder, we actually haven't added too much of any accents of purple there. So over top the light fur, carefully, I'm going to add line after line with wide gaps in between, testing it out. I find that it needs a bit more of a yellow highlight right there where I've added the purple, so I go in with a lightened yellow mixture and add that to the left and right of these violets and a little bit over top. Now I just love the little bit of orange on the left side of the bridge of the nose, but I want to connect it to that upper part highlight. So I place light yellow there and then wipe some of it off, not all of it, with my finger. And the last and final dabs of paint that I add are actually just white. And I add it to right above the nose, to the far left of it, with just white. Careful little dabs that I wipe off slightly in the center of the bridge of the nose, and then on the far left of the left eye. And that wraps it up for this ginger cat tutorial, guys. I hope it all blessed you, every bit of it. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching. Bye.